tries to, as best we can, identify a theme early in the year that can help us make some connections so that the new school sessions are not just random topics from month to month. And this year, the theme that we came up with was Black political thought. And what we wanted to do was show a wide variety of different interpretations, different philosophies connected to Black liberation throughout the entire year. Not every single month was directly connected to this notion of Black political thought, but we definitely tried to have an intentional focus on that. And so tonight we want to be able to connect the dots. We want to be able to have some discussion with each other, and then also have Elder try to help us make some sense of Black political thought in its various iterations and the way that it's merged and come forth throughout the last half millennium, really. And so, and before that, honestly. So what I'm gonna do is just to give us a quick reminder of the sessions for the year. And if you're, if you haven't, if you hadn't seen all of them, it's totally fine. And we'll have, plenty of time to talk about these. We're not gonna do like a summary of each session or anything like that. But some of the questions that we have designed tonight will help us talk through these ideas. So if you remember back January, we started out the year with Brother Resma Menachem talking about liberation through the lens of our embodiment, right? And through actually literally like cellular liberation, and thinking about how we deal with intergenerational trauma. And then we moved into hearing from Brother Jared Ball, who talked to us about his economic philosophy and the myth and propaganda of Black buying power, and really kind of took us in a more kind of like a Marxist, more radical notion of anti-capitalism. And then we moved into, if you move the slide, then we actually did hear from Elder, and this was at around the time when another conversation around reparations was really hot. And so Elder led us through a history of the concept of reparations. And then we took another turn and moved to Tia Simone Gardner, who helped us understand our relationship to land and our relationship to our natural environment, and specifically water, with her emphasis. And this was in April on Black people and our relationship to water through an arts perspective. You can go to the next slide. Skip one back. Yep, there you go. And then we heard from Brother Uhuru Williams on Black radicalism in May, and connecting a lot of different dots, Panthers, but also histories of radicalism, basically again for the last 100 years. And then my amazing colleague Shakita Thomas Capete and myself, we took a tour of Pan-African theory and covered specifically the modern Pan-African movement, consisting of the Pan-African Congresses in that arena. And now we're moving into the summertime, and we heard from Brother Michael Curry, who again took us through legal theory, connecting the dots, and thinking about our connections through law and politics. And in August, we heard from Sister Ebony Adedayo around Black feminism, and specifically in darkened feminist epistemologies. And then in the fall, we heard from the crew from NIDCAD, Network for the Development of Children of African Descent, Brother Sam Ramos, Sister Unique Tripp, and her daughter Mariana Williams, talking about educational authority and who gets to develop curriculum. And then finally, we ended up last month in October with our amazing sister Ngia Lawrence Porter, talking to us about language and linguistics, and specifically the history of Black English. And so you see all that put together, you see also why Nu Skool is the place to be, fourth Friday of every month. What an amazing year we've had in terms of just people. I mean, we had, nationally known folks, New York Times bestsellers, local activists, local philosophers, just from, covers so much territory. And so before we get into our conversation with Elder, we wanted to start out with our pre-discussion questions for tonight. And we have a couple questions. So first, if you are a Nu Skool regular, or you've been here several times throughout the year this year, which session stood out for you and why? And what were some of your major takeaways from this year as you think about that, all those months that we just ran through? And then second, if you are new to Nu Skool, or if this is your first time, or maybe only a couple times this year, what brought you here? What are the things that you're trying to learn more about in this space? So I'm going to go ahead and open up the breakout rooms, and we'll be in there for about 10 minutes or so to have some opening discussion. Thing coming out of the groups, how about if we have someone who's been to a few sessions? What were some of the sessions that stood out for you? Why? And what were some of the takeaways or learnings from this year? Let's get a brave person to speak up.
The Black buying power was a huge one in the group that I was in. And what was also mentioned was the feminism one. And then we talked about Black liberation, Black cellular liberation, which I missed Resma's talk, but I caught the year before Kendris Watson's talk and was really intrigued by that. I went back and I watched his again and took notes and was going deeper into my study within that, because it's always been a point of interest, just undoing the conditioning, so it's oh, this is even deeper, this is another level of undoing the conditioning. So yeah.
Yeah, I love the connections that you're making there. And even to sessions from last year, right? I mean, if we look at Nu Skool as a curriculum, right? That, there are connections to be made across, even when sessions don't necessarily agree in terms of philosophical tradition. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. How about another? We got time for some other folks to share out. What stood out for you this year?
In our group, go ahead. Sorry. Well, I was just going to share in our group, two of us talked about Simone, who gave a beautiful presentation on art and using the water and history. And I was just really amazed by that whole process.
Definitely a powerful session. Was there someone else was also speaking at the same time?
Yeah, that was me. And yeah, I was just saying, Sister Ebony's talk, we mentioned her as well, just the power of that, how affirming that was to really understand Black women's epistemology and how we are the foundational, thought leaders in so many ways for our community, and for really just how it's not honored in the academy in particular, and how we're made to really question ourselves and our existence, and really not honor our own ways of knowing. And so that was really, really powerful for me. And I just appreciated her so much for bringing that to us.
Definitely. And G, I thought you were going to say yours was the favorite one was yours. Because That was definitely one that stood out for me. I think the sisters really brought it this year. And speaking of knowledge that's not validated by the academy, and while we were in the small groups, Elder said this is where you come to get the knowledge that you can't get in college. And and I think that certainly rings true, because we need to be able to validate our own intellectual histories and knowledge systems. And so that's what Nu Skool is all about. We got time for one more person to share out. Anything else that came up in the small groups? All right. Well, we are definitely going to have a lot more time tonight to be able to share with each other, but we do want to have some time to be able to hear from our teacher, our distinguished elder, and for many of us, our mentor, Elder Mahmoud. And Elder, when we went through that list of all the different sessions from this year, we had people in the realm of psychology, people in the realm of linguistics, the arts. We had Pan-Africanists, nationalists, feminists, so many different knowledge systems that were coming together and ways of thinking about Black political thought. Can you talk to us a little bit about why is it important that we have understand these different traditions of Black political thought?
Yes, I don't know whether I'm capable of addressing it in the right way, but it's certainly as important as anything that we can ever do for ourselves is to study ourselves and learn what our experiences have been in connection with where we are. And all of the lecturers had a piece to contribute to this growth of new knowledge. Knowledge is not a mystery. It's created by human beings, and it is created. It's not something that just happens. And knowledge is created by a given set of group of people that is understood as knowledge among them. Its knowledge is, in a modern sense, it's information that is organized and interpreted for use. That's what knowledge is. It's not saying that a doctor in the 19th century, a medical doctor, would scarcely know what you're talking about when you bring up something like eugenics, because it was not, it's an additive science. It was not, they didn't know anything. That knowledge had to be created. And you do that in all fields of study. And we are challenged by we have to say this, the white supremacy paradigm, the doctrine, which is appreciated for what it has given to the world, but too much of it is false and not even good historical mythology. A lot of the things that this body of knowledge are wholesome, outrageous lies. And they have to be challenged by a body of knowledge and information which proves that it is a lie. It is not true, or all of the truth, sometimes nowhere near the truth. And that's natural for a people who have been oppressed by a system to resist. That's human. It's not human to fight or to resist. I'm trying to frame the right words to say this, because I don't want to make anybody mad at me right away. But I know somebody every time I say something, I get some flack from somebody, and they're not all the time white people. They're Black people who certainly don't agree with me. And I've met enough Black people to know I love them anyway, even though you don't think I'm worth a darn. I want that make that crystal clear. I think the whole meaning of our existence is trying to make the human world a better place as a part of the human family. And it takes new knowledge to do that, to bring about how you conceptualize the world, for instance. You know, and the new knowledge should say to the world, plainly, we claim there are 8 billion of us, and everybody's included in the family that I'm talking about. And we have to say to the prevailing body of what we call knowledge, no, this is not enough. You haven't said enough. And I don't think you know enough, or you understand enough to say that you speak for the world, for you can define the human family in terms of caste, you know, the whole, you know, pyramidal system of white on top, blacks at the base of that. That's artificial, but well, that part of stuff is lie. And you're not even trying to pursue knowledge. It's in the interest of power. That's what much of what we call knowledge is about: cutting people out, keeping them out, pressing them down. The whole thing of being Negro in America, the way people talk about Black people, is like a formula, not like humanity, you know, trying to keep them down or out or argue over them or something. That's what we've been. And the Democrats and Republicans and the Free Soil Party and the Liberty Party, and there's several other parties in America before the Democrats and Republicans. They all play with the Negro question. And we're trying to say to these people, there is no Negro, that's your creation. There are no Negroes in Africa that I know of anybody who calls themselves Negro. That's a false definition of who we are. And we've been forced to live under that construct until very recently. One of the major achievements of the 1960s was to get rid of that constructed definition, beginning with calling yourselves Negroes. Africans didn't choose that. It comes out of the family of European languages, that namely the Latin languages in the modern sense, Portuguese and Spanish, who had relationship with Africa before Chris got lost. They were the first ones to have trading relations with. So the word flowed out of an innocent adjective. It means dark, like or black, if you will. Don't care. It means Sudan. That's another word, Arabic for black. Ethiopia or Ethiopia for black. It's made into an adjective now, but it's really an adjective. It's to describe who people are. That's innocent. But what you associate with that word, Negro, means slavery. And I can't think of anything else about them that they're noted for, except they were slaves. And that erases our identity, the rich heritage of African nations, some of which rose and fall long before there was such a thing in the world called Europe, which is a modern idea. The Africans rising and falling in their own ways, in their own time and context on the vast continent, which is over 3 times the size of the United States. There are many ways to be an African. There's no one way to be an African any more than there's one way to be a European. So you invent these things like white. There's no really white man, you know, as in you can express culture and language and so on. You can talk about people who are Scots, Dutch, Swedes, Germans, English, French, because there's a land that they live on. That's where they get their names. That's who they are. You can't erase geography from history and culture. You can't. The origin of people comes from some geographic space, and they look a certain way, you know. But the idea that people with less melanin than the rest of the world are one people is nonsense. That's, I mean, it's really nonsense because it's a dangerous idea which evolved in the modern world, that you create this super tribe called white. Yet they don't speak the same language, they don't have the same religion. And if you want to do it like a geologist would, they have different topography, different regions of a given continent that they came from, where their culture and history comes from. There's no white language, there's no white religion. That's kind of, we're trying to deconstruct that. And if people are talking about critical race theory, you are too late. The cat is out of the bag. The genie is out of the bottle. That's enough. Okay.
Then that's a perfect segue. And it reminds me of the James Baldwin saying, that language comes into existence out of brutal necessity.
Yeah.
And it seems as though knowledge also comes into existence out of brutal necessity. Right. And so these knowledge systems that we're talking about have been forged through our experiences. Right. And then those experiences will help and shape what those knowledges are, and how and then how the language that we use to have to activate them and to bring them to our, bring them to a broad mass. I have a question specifically. We had several, as we normally do, I think throughout the year, we have several folks who come from more of like a Black nationalist kind of framing and orientation.
Sure.
And then we have some folks who come more from a Pan-Africanist framing and orientation, but often there's a lot of overlap between Pan-Africanism and Black nationalism. Can you help us understand the connections and disconnections there between those two frameworks?
Yeah, I think they're kindred spirits. I think you're right. And we need to work on that now. It's not refined yet enough for people to make definitive claims. I have to make adjustment in my own thinking about whether I'm a nationalist or Pan-Africanist and so forth. It's easier for me to answer the question of being a Pan-Africanist, which I am practicing, and all that means is what it means. Pan means all Africans. You're interested in African questions, system, politics, whatever it is, because they're African people in the world, and they found out, just like Europeans, maybe a different way arriving at where we arrive. But the fact of the matter is, I'm a Pan-Africanist. Oh, it's not a bad word. Pan means all. You can be Pan-American. There are people who call themselves Pan-Americans. So I believe I'm interested in African people in the world that I live in, primarily, but also the historical and cultural world and all these other things that African peoples are and what they do wherever they are, whether they're in the motherland, as we say, the continent which spawned them, or whether they're scattered throughout the world, the Western world, throughout the Pacific Islands, Australia, wherever their Black people are, because that's a question in the modern world that whites created about skin color. So I'm drawn to that in a wide sense of Black people's questions and problems, because I don't think what I'm talking about can get along with some people who call themselves superior, and that inherently God-given rights to do certain things and do things to other people, matter-of-factly, harm them, enslave them, curse them, disrespect them, deny their children the opportunity to be fully fledged human beings through educational systems and so forth. So there's a clash there, kind of me with the larger so-called imperialist white world. On the world stage, you narrate, I was born in America. So far as I know, that when African people have been on this land of the indigenous populations, mistakenly called Indians. The 600 or 700 different nations were here before Chris got lost, and so the Europeans, I think it's the greatest explosion in the history of the world. The modern state, the imperialist thing. I mean, I agree with the illiterate and sometimes learned politicians in Congress when they talk about America being the greatest ever. I think in the great means like awesome, you know what I mean? That's not necessarily good. Great don't mean good, For a long fire is a great event, but it wasn't good. So I'm not talking about that. The America is a great empire. I mean, Attila the Hun would be just overthrown. Genghis Khan said, I couldn't imagine what the little land, the guy who cried because there were no more worlds to conquer. You know, he cried. The great Greek was Alexandria. He was crying because nothing for you to do. I ain't got no more people to beat up. And he cried. You've seen that statue of him crying, you know, but the world Alexander the Great lived in was no bigger than Texas. The land that he's conquered, no bigger than Texas. This thing, the new world, unknown continents. Nobody knew that existed. Well, you know, dreamers and philosophers talked about it, but really it became a reality after this accident in history. And that's what it was, but the people were trying to get to the East. That's the old world, and so-called discovered the new world. And that was the part of Africa who had been known to the old world in different ways, had relations going with certain people, call them Europeans, like Greeks and Romans. That's a part of certain African states' history too. Ethiopia, the word comes from the father of Greek history, who called it Ethiopia, you know, meaning dark in their language, dark skin like Negro in a modern language. That's all it meant. God should stretch forth an arm before Ethiopia. And Ethiopia was once people considered among the most civilized people on earth, according to them. And, you know, and their propaganda and so forth. So we know this color thing it's always been here, that the Negro is not a discovery, it's an invention. You know, there's a book by Roy Conrad who explains how people become Negroes and how an Irishman becomes white. You know, he wasn't that white in Europe, of course. He was treated as bad as Negroes in Europe. He was on auction blocks in the Atlantic Islands. People know this, so what has spoiled this growing story for the last 400 or 500 years is the notion out of some people's mind, out of their inheritance from conquest and so forth, that they are superior naturally. It's God-given right to be superior. That's what we're up against, you know, and I'm against that. As an African-American, I'm against slavery of anybody, including obviously myself, but anybody who thinks that I'm not a person with a beating heart and living affection with 11 basic needs like everybody else on the planet, I'm opposed to them. I don't mean it's like, you know, just oppose. I would do anything with anybody on this earth to help overthrow the doctrine of white supremacy. I would say, Frederick Douglass said, I'll line up with the devil to fight against slavery. That's how I feel about it, what it's done to so many people. So that's the politics now. History is not a sweet, necessarily loving story. There are love stories within history, we know that. But history is driven by politics and power. Well, not all power is not, power can be used and misused and overused and so forth. And I think that where we are now is a chapter in human history, in the family of human beings. That's what I think. Right now, we're on the verge of helping to create a new world that transcends race, I think. And the Black Americans are going to have a lot to say about this new world, which transcends this powerful myth, no more than 400 or 500 years old, that I belong to a race. I'm saying to white people now, I am not a race, and neither are you. So grow up. There's no such thing as race in a literal sense. It's nonsense.
Yes, that's true, Elder.
Real. Okay.
That's powerful. Thank you, Elder. Thank you for that response. We had a question come in the chat from Brother Anura, and he asked you, can people be both a Pan-Africanist and a Black nationalist? What are the differences and similarities?
Yeah, they can. You know, nationalism is before Pan, you know, it means all the people. There are people who have differences, who we think would naturally be in the same camp, and often they are. And the people who are seen as Pan-Africanists go beyond civil rights, the civil rights struggle. They don't see the civil rights struggle as a struggle within the borders of this, and it's very specific. In the United States of America, battle for civil rights means you're dealing with the legal rights of people in a given state, country, and so forth. That's what the civil rights movement is. A nationalist. There are a lot of people who are integrationists, have some national elements in their makeup, and that, like the proud Negro, you know, like achievers and so forth. Until day before yesterday, they used to be called a woman who would stand up like Harriet Beecher, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, Frederick Douglass, William Wells Brown, or Malcolm X in today's language, and Martin Luther King, which we refer to as race men and women. They are people who stand up and challenge white supremacy. They're race, and they're heroic figures. Many of my heroes are the people who call race men. I know that if I were living in the 1920s, I would be called a race man, you know, even though I don't believe in race. I don't believe that has anything intrinsically to do with where we are now. This is a struggle over power, over the right to be whoever you are. That's what I think the struggle is, the meaning of struggle. So it goes beyond race. But there are narrow-minded people in any sphere of life. There's some Black nationalists, you know, I embrace them, but, you know, I don't agree with them. You know, the people who say that, no, I shouldn't have it anyway. You know, that 80% of Black people are Toms. There are 10% of them, yeah, they got education, they know how to lead and leaders and so forth, but they're confused. And the other 5% of whoever it is, even more confused, but the 5% of us, we know and have the truth. Everybody else kind of cut out. You ever met a 5%er? I love those guys. I met them in the 60s. Yeah, the thing about them is that they read. And their history is tied to antiquity. They want you know any Egyptian history? Well, I can't talk to you. You ain't Black enough. You don't know anything. You don't know King Tut and his achievements, or the 18th dynasty. No, no. You're part of that 80%, ignorant, confused, and so forth. There are people like I haven't met. It's been about 10 years since I've seen a 5%, but I liked arguing with them. I mean, debating with them. I mean, because they had these big books with them. They'll pull them out on you, go back to the 19th dynasty. This is where. Well, I don't think that there were Black people in Egypt, but I don't think they were like Negroes in America. I just don't. They look like, some of them look like us. Some of them look like people we would call white. Egypt was a multicultural civilization with a ruling elite, like any other, you know, Hyksos, you know, the right down the line, from when Europe got involved, the Greeks hooked into Egypt, the Romans took it over to the part of Africa, the northern part of Africa, and Romanized much of Africa. They were foreigners. The thing that when Jesus was born, he was one of a collection of people who lived in the empire of the Roman elites and so forth. But no, I think I can talk to any side of people. The phone is ringing and I don't want it to ring. So I'm gonna just let it ring. But I don't know if, I hope I didn't make it more confusing to you. Yes, I'm Pan-Africanist. It's progressive to me. It's open-ended to the human family. I believe everybody's here on earth belongs here. You know, wherever they are is where they are. We're gonna have to I can embrace you even if you can't embrace me. But I don't want you telling me you got to enslave me because your God dictated that you should do that. You know, that I'm different. I don't have anything against anybody's religion. Except, you know, if people say, well, I'm white and free and 21, and you're not. And therefore, I have the right and the obligation to step on you, to make you a footstool in history, to disrespect you, to call you out of your name. Even though you haven't done anything to me, that has nothing to do with it. Martin Luther King said it this way: Black people in an impossible situation. It's like a man being robbed for having money. And the robber blame you for having the money. You know, that's what Black people in an impossible situation. What do you hate me for? What did you do? What did you do? What did I do to you? What, you know, what caused it? Every Black person has responded that way, one way or another. You know, not the way I would respond necessarily. But they would say, what is? When I was called a nigger for the first time, I tell this everywhere, but I was about 9 years old. And the first time I really heard the word nigger, I know I heard it before, but I didn't register, was about a 4-year-old white child. And I was walking in front of this is the segregated South in Savannah, Georgia, where I was born. And the mother told the little girl they were on the porch, go ahead, coaching us. Say it, say it, say it. And she came right in front of me and said, nigger, 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 right to the end of the block. Answer it for me.
I'll just push
Yeah,
it.
yeah. So yeah, tell him, Mama. So, you know, think of that. Now, I know that no human being is born a white supremacist. I got to act like I know that. That you weren't born that way.
Right.
You were socialized that way. That's your culture. That's your heritage. I know enough white people to know that all white people are not white supremacists. I know that much. You know, but those of you who are the most dangerous people on the planet is a white supremacist. It's nothing. It's an extension of what Hitler was trying to do. Hitler was the whitest of white supremacists. And if you notice today in this country, the people who have the insignia of his swastika and so forth are American people who believe what Hitler believed. Hitler, the thing of race, is that he wasn't satisfied with people being just white. He wanted Aryans, perfect. So he would, a lot of white people wanted to kill him lips right after he got through with Jews and gays and people with tawny skins and so forth. It's a logical extension towards murder. That's what racism is. It is a murderous theme in human history. No, Black people aren't racist. Can they be? I don't know. I doubt it. Given where so far the story is now, when people saying race, I can't be a racist. I'm race is backed up by power. But race, you can't separate race, white supremacy from power and the institutions to carry out the oppression of other people. The Black people are in no sense that way, and nor do we think that way. We're not an aggressive people or civilization. We've been damned for not being aggressive. I'm not talking about getting fight in the streets. I'm talking about messing with other people. We don't do that. We're not controlled by domination, aggression, and greed. That's what whites have inherited within their culture. Is domination, aggression, and greed. If I'm around you and you're not like me, I gotta dominate. And I'm an aggressor. And I have an appetite that's endless in the interest of power. That's all it's about. At the bottom line, we say power. We had it right in the 60s when Stokely Carmichael initiated the Black Power movement. That's what we want. All that white people have that Black people need and should want is power, the ability to act on their own behalf.
Thank you, Elder. Thank you for that. You know, I want to transition to our next question. In August, we have Sister Ebony Adedayo lead us through the Black feminist epistemology. And, she reminded us that we can trace feminism back to African women working together to challenge patriarchy on the continent. So my question is, why is it critical for us to understand Black feminism as a vital aspect of Black liberation?
Well, that's the gem of Black people's movement for freedom, is the Black woman. There's nothing, I shouldn't say nothing, but there are few personages in history that's equal to her role, especially in modern history. And I'll talk about the United States because I know a little more about it, but it's true in Latin America, the 21 republics of Latin America, where many more Black people there than in the United States. It's the Atlantic islands of the sea, Jamaica, and where the Arawaks and once lived, where the Latino once lived, where Haiti is, who were murdered and had successful genocidal campaigns against. Very few people who were there in the islands, the Arawaks, the Tianos, and those original inhabitants are there. They've blended with Africans. Most of Jamaica is mostly African. So is Haiti, big islands. Cuba is 51%. If they lived in America, you would call these people 51% of Black people, because the Spanish put a little different shade on the race question, but they're racist too. All of these new republics are bound by racism. That's what helped create the white man. So the Black woman in America, there is an article. It's the most beautiful article, written by Lorraine Hansberry. My God, I can't. It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever read in Ebony magazine, describing who the Black woman really is. She is almost unparalleled in human history, because, and I say that's generally true in the Western Hemisphere of the enslaved populations in Jamaica and Haiti and Bahamas and wherever you could name, and the 21 republics of Latin America. But I'm talking specifically about the Black woman in the USA, because it's a special kind of enslavement, which may be a cut away from the enslavement of people in other places. People are dominated by the language groups. See how language defines, that first Spanish and Portuguese speaking Africans. There are more of them than there are of English speaking Africans in the United States, because most of their conquerors were these guys, the guy in Mexico, Peru, Juan Pizarro, and all of those, these names. I had to read them about the first people around the Cape of Africa, Portuguese, and so forth. We in the United States had a special kind of thing, and what it has done, this system, to the human spirit, the human being, and to crush his humanity. This is why I think Black people are great people. They failed to do that. That's what the fight is about. They failed to make us 3/5 of a man. They failed to make us breathing truth. They failed to make us what George Washington called a troublesome species of property. They failed. And anybody can't see that, can't see. That's where we came from. Douglas taught us to judge not a man by the height that he reaches, but by the depth from which he comes. That's us. At the base of the pyramid, and the centerpiece of our survival, have been Black women. She was not allowed to be a woman naturally female. She had to play the male role. That's why Black families, when they were intact, were more democratic than white families, because the role that Black women had to play, her role and his role. So day before yesterday, she created so many things for us to live by, and what they call home economics and all that stuff. Half of the diet of what they call a Southern cooking is the Black woman. I mean, real Southern cooking. I'm talking about collard greens stuff, what the African brought in, peanuts and stuff, and stuff. You can, the diet of what they call Southern cooked fried chicken is essentially Black. There are white people who are Southern white people who know this because that's who cooked for them. That's the food developed their taste. They took the white Black woman was exposed to both European and African style food preparing. She's a genius in what you call home economics. She had to make everything. Thank God for my niece, Robin Hickman, who makes dolls. She's an artist. That come off the slave plantation. When Black people used to make their own toys. That's a Black woman. She kept the family together. Took the whippings, the same thing that Black men took. She had whips on her Black back and brands on her chest, not her face. She survived that and becoming one of the most loving creatures the world has ever seen. I know about the bad. We did. Other people just got a better PR department than us about women. The Black woman, she is beautiful. To me, see, that's another thing. How you can't say that? Yes, I can, because that's my opinion. You say, well, you can't have that opinion. I can. Everybody's entitled to an opinion, right? They're like something else be entitled to. I'm saying everybody ought to be entitled to that. That's my opinion. You don't have to agree with me. That's not what I'm arguing about. She is beyond category when it comes to womanhood. She is in the 19th century civil women's rights movement, very prominent. One of the most prominent names in the women's movement of the 19th century, the first wave. We know about Sojourner Truth. We don't know about Sarah Douglas's. No, there's another Douglas name, should be famous. It's a woman. We don't know about Susan, oh God, Philadelphia. I got to do my Black woman history. But anyway, there are tons of them, I'm saying. They won't come to me immediately. Who helped shape the Black church, who helped shape Black religion. That's one of our basic institutions. There's debating about the institution, brother. Let me tell you, we wouldn't be a people as in peoplehood without the Black church. And I'm not talking about any denomination that belongs to. I embrace all of it. It's been here for over 200 years. One of the oldest American institutions is the Black church in Savannah, Georgia, where I was born as the first African Baptist church, 1794, over 200 years old. That was during so-called revolutionary times. And right in the front of the church, you know what they have? A statue of Haitian soldiers sent from Haiti by Napoleon Bonaparte when Haiti was a colony of France. There were 2,200 of them, and among those 2,200 were Henri Christophe, one of the liberators of Haiti. They got a statue to them. You don't know about that battle, right? 1777. It's right there. That shows you that people were conscious. What they didn't say the Colored Baptist Church. They said what? The first African Baptist Church. And as religion goes, they had a little argument, that Jesus said this and Paul said that, and they split. And they've got a second African Baptist church about 3 blocks away. It's crazy. But that's schisms that exist in religions. And so there are 2 churches. And if you look at the African Methodist Episcopal Church, belonged in that same decade by Richard Allen. There's a school named for him in South Carolina, Allen University. Women were the base of that, and the auxiliary people. If Philip Randolph were here, he would tell you that the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Party is the greatest Black union ever, would never have been formed without Black women as the auxiliary group. That was our backbone for raising funds and cooking for us on the road and so forth. No, the Black woman in America is the greatest story never told. You know about the greatest story ever told. You know, this is the greatest story never told. Is her. I can't overstate it. There wouldn't be Black peoplehood without her. No other woman has been forced by history to play that role of being. That's why Black marriages were more democratic than whites. When we had 85% of Black people were married, you know, it was because the Black woman, you know, kept the household together, you know, worked on the side, took in clothes, worked major in home economics. This Black woman's genius. home economics. Madam C.J. Walker is a great story to read, you know, with the hair thing. That's who became the first woman millionaire to earn the money on her own. She didn't inherit anything. C.J. Walker was married at 16, divorced at 20, and never married again and made $1 million. Tell somebody, show me a group, produce somebody like that. You know, we are, yeah, I used to have a specialized speech on Black women, you know, called The Role. I haven't done this in a while. And some of you recognize and some you won't. Anna Julia Cooper. I didn't recognize Anna Julia Cooper until about 25 years ago. I didn't know she existed. But thanks to some hardworking Black scholars dug up the history of not uncelebrated, should be celebrated Black women. Anna Julia Cooper was one responsible for the term When and Where I Entered. There's a book by Paula Giddens on that. That's what she nothing really is going on until when and where I entered. And then she stirs it up. That's the truth, Ruth. You know that. You know, if you have a mother like I had, and they weren't that different, even now, I have all these skills and the grandmother talk to you about Black people. You know, as a matter of fact, wasn't going out of the way. There was no moment saying, I'm gonna teach you Black history. You didn't know that. You're just telling me what you knew. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing today. And I just found that out 8 or 10 years ago. Why are you doing this, man? Why are you going all these places? How you end up in France talking to the North Vietnamese, the enemies of America? How do you get there? Hell, I don't know. My grandma, you know, you're supposed to do that. You're supposed to be on the right side. That's all I can say about that. I'm sorry.
And it seems,
but that's the
and
yeah.
I love that point, you know, because I mean, history is infinite. You know, we can't ever tell the full story, but we can certainly erase stories, you know, and keep history from folks. But history is infinite. For every one or two historical people, events, things that we know, there's, you know, millions and millions that we don't know. So I appreciate that that point, right? We're getting low on time because we want to definitely be able to open up. There's so much rich thought to be discussed here. So I'm gonna ask a quick ending question, and then we'll open it up for broader discussion. There's a lot of good things happening in the chat, and but the question really is, where do you see us moving right now with Black political thought? As you like, can you speculate out? You know, it seems to me, and I may be wrong on this, that our imagination was more open when you think about the movements that were happening, that were about whether it was cultural nationalism or Black nationalism or Pan-Africanism. There were more things happening, and now we seem to have, you know, a lot of access and opportunity to talk to each other, but it seems like we're very much stuck in I would say like a liberal reformist conversation, largely in our communities, that are about very minimal changes you know, some laws here and there, some, you know, but we like, I feel like our imagination is very limited right now. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's just my own pessimism on that. But what do you think as you project out, Elder? What do you think is coming up for Black political thought?
Just from those few words you uttered, starts me to thinking about what you just asked. And I think we're not that far apart. I think that 2 or 3 things can be true at the same time. They are all important to us. The liberation struggle is the key. We've got to hold on to that for the sake of our ancestors, for blessing us with a movement that can help change the world. We're not the centerpiece. We're not superior to white people, crazy stuff like that. Get out of race thinking altogether. We are a people. And a people doesn't mean race. A people is language, customs, habits, geography, so forth. We are at another, they call it a time of reckoning. You know, it's like biblical stuff that is danger and doubt at the same time. Opportunity often comes on the wings of danger. The most dangerous moment this country has been in since the Civil War is now. But there's also the greatest possibility for us to take a leap in faith and change this country, come hell or high water. The message is clear. Black people are right to want to be respected as human beings. That's not against anybody. White people and nobody else. Just to be who you are. We're not better, but we're different and proud of it. You know, that's what I think we're fighting for. A part of what we're fighting for. If I know that, many of the Black people know that. Some Black people don't know that they don't. Life is just life, going to work, getting up, whatever, being out of work, not getting up, whatever. You know, and don't think about, because they haven't been in the circles around the people who think about this stuff. When somebody doing the boogaloo, you thinking about this stuff. We are complex people. The other thing that Black people have to accept, like all people, there are thinking people among Black people. In the white community, they call them intellectuals. It doesn't mean you snooty or something like that. That means you pursue the life of the mind, like somebody pursue basketball or whatever. That's all it means. But if you take the white supremacy paradigm, that's what you think the Black intellectual is different from the white guy. You don't want to be a part of an oppressive system. And that has to be made clear to Black people. And I know some of you know that. You know that I'm sure you know both Malcolm and Dr. King were sincere human beings. You know, they have different ways of going after the same thing. So let's not get an argument about stuff like that. You know, that's for somebody else. Critical race theory. You're behind the time. That's on the left talking that critical race theory stuff. You know, the breakthroughs have already been made in part by the existence of Black Studies program on 50 of the most prestigious colleges and universities in America. Yale, Harvard, Princeton, you know, Brown, all of them have strong Black Studies programs. And their schools produce Black scholars. And I'm so happy to see that, because I don't even know these guys. I'm glad they're here. So we must stick to our guns. That's a plus. That we have a growth, a leap intellectually taking place in Black people, among Black people. We have a leap going, and we're more politically sophisticated than we were 10 or 15 years ago. I don't mean that everybody's changed and so forth, but that's happening in the midst of all the dope dealing and the people are robbing and doing. That's real. But that's not who we are. That's the opposition. promoting Black people like that. I want, if I want strong police departments. I don't want to defund the police. No. So you don't want to do it? No. What do you mean? That's not well thought out to me. But I'm for radical reform of police departments across the United States. But just to use a catchword like that, and then that's how we're losing. The liberals are losing the battle because of that, arguing over something. Like we've already made some breakthroughs. There were books being published by Black intellectuals than ever, more productive than we've ever been. And we're in spaces and places that we've never been. Look at the news, all you people who know TV. I don't know TV that well. I just had one in my room until my children brought me a real TV. I didn't even know all this stuff was going on, all these brilliant Black people. I didn't know all these Black women were on air. I just got the real kind of TV. You guys, what I'm talking about, the real. I can't, there's so many programs. I'm overwhelmed by them. So I'm still at ABC and CBS and so forth. We don't look at that anymore. They got all these other stations. But anyway, I'm so proud of that to see the result of the 1960s set the platform for the people in their 35, 40 years old. And I hope some of them recognize that. There were some great people in the civil rights movement. They did some great things for us. Now you pick your hero, I pick mine, but I don't do that. I mean, the thrust of what they did is to get rid of Jim Crow. They sucked Jim Crow in the eye. And they stopped the public humiliation of Black people. Yes, they did. They took whippings and went to jail and bit by dogs and so forth. And don't you forget it. You riding their coattails. It's the ones who brought Black studies departments to the university, are those people of the 60s and 70s. And so if you're smart, that's great, but you gotta have a moral center too. You gotta have some respect, some standard for living in this world that includes and respects African-American people. I would say that to white students. You need to watch them, not these other guys who want everything and never-ending appetite. I agree with the panelists. You talk about the avaricious, greedy business class. Yeah, you shouldn't have all that money. People are poor. That's right. I know the capitalist argument, well, you go for yourself, I'm an individual. I think that's false. The human being, the human animal on this planet is a social being. I think ultimate individualism is anti-human because you do anything to get what you need, what you want to anybody, including your own family sometimes. That's a false doctrine. I think it's better to be social. The Africans taught us a person is a person because of other persons. You wouldn't be human without other persons. So get away from this individualistic stuff. Yes, you're a human being. You're born with certain talents. I'm not talking about that. To think of yourself as an individual, self-created agent, self-made man, self-made, those are false consciousness things. It's not true. So we have a job to do. Black Americans must honor their ancestors and the struggle that they fought, put up with, the bleeding, and the murders that they endured for us, and for people who are real young, like high school people. Try, I know it's hard, to listen to some of your elders. I know it's hard, but you don't belong to a different stage, but the same age in history. The last 50 years of Puritan history that produced you. So you have to understand something about the civil rights movement, who was who and what was what, and why people are doing all these things about taking down statues of our oppressors. The people who oppressed us are not our heroes. Ulysses Grant wasn't my hero, can't be your hero. He was for the enslavement of Black people, denying their humanity. You'd be crazy to do that. No, it's they who are crazy to expect me to allow you to step on me, to disrespect me, to call me out of my name, and you claim you as a hero. That's insanity. No, you can't claim a white supremacist as a hero. He's an enemy not to you, but to mankind in general. He's an anti-hero. I'm sorry, I said hero. Anti-hero to the human family. He's opposed to people being different. You got to be like me, or behave like me, or think like me. No, that's God. If you want to go, no, you can't have that. You're not God. Thomas Jefferson wasn't God. He was a man just like me. Yeah. And he wasn't all that much smarter than me. That's what I said. Aren't you kind of arrogant? Yeah, I should be arrogant about that. Yeah. Yeah, he's a man.
Well
He's a
said.
man.
Well said. Elder, thank you so much
Thank you.
for blessing us with, as always, just with your wisdom and your perspective. We definitely, folks can unmute and give a round of applause or a shout or holler, all those
Yes,
good things.
Elder.
Woo!
I can't honestly think of a better way to end New School for this year. And we definitely look forward to 2022 New School. And we're gonna go ahead, and there's a lot that came up in the discussions in the chat, and hoping that folks are able to have some good discussion in some breakout rooms, and then we'll come back together again. So I'll go ahead and reopen the breakout rooms, but we did have a couple questions that I will put in the chat. I think they were shared accidentally earlier as the first set of questions, but the questions are: what was your introduction to Black political thought? How are you taught about about what Black liberation means? And what are you looking forward to experiencing at New School in 2022? Are there certain philosophies on Black liberation that you think we might be missing or not covering as much as we should be? So I'll go ahead and open the rooms back up.
Get them in the chat, please, before we
there.
go.
It's in there, you don't see it?
Who am I supposed to?
All right.
It's in the chat.